Carrie here. Today I wanted to show you the assembly process of a Reborn doll. And so I have a baby that I just completed painting and is all ready to be assembled. This is baby Kaya. This is an African American baby that I just made. He has nice painted hair, and I have the head and I have all of the limbs finished. So now what we need to do is put this little guy together. So the first thing, this is the cloth body that works with this baby. And this body, sometimes the bodies have zip ties threaded through for the limbs and the neck. This one has strings. So what I have to do for this one, the first thing I've got to do is take out all these strings and replace them with zip ties. So I will just show one of those, how that's done. I'm not gonna do all 5 because that would be boring, but I will show you the process of replacing with the zip tie. So they have a little hole in the cloth where the string or zip tie gets threaded through. You got to make sure this tie is going the right direction. Sometimes they're easy and sometimes they're really difficult to get in there. So just putting the zip ties in can be a time-consuming thing. Yeah, this is really tight. Let me see if I can. Sometimes if you go the other way, it works better. Sometimes I might have to just get a thinner tie. So it seems to be going this way. Okay, so we just push it through. Now, of course, there's all these little sewn parts within it, so it doesn't go through easily. You got to keep stopping and getting the tie past those little snags in the center. So once we get that through, that is almost to the end. It was a tough one. Not usually struggling to put the ties in this much, but this one is got a very tight pathway. So once you get it through the other end, then what I do is I put it through just enough to zip it closed, just like a couple clicks, so I have enough room so I can adjust the measurement of these holes once I put the head and limbs in. You don't want to pull this too much because you might not be able to fit your head and limbs in. So that's the first thing we do, and I'm going to go ahead and do this with all of the limbs as well so that we have a body that is secured with zip ties. Okay, so we now have the body all put together with the zip ties, and it is ready to be, the limbs are ready to be attached. So the next step that we have to do, and just so you know too, this bodies can be all different shapes and sizes. Kaya is a baby that has 3/4 arms and legs. A lot of the Reborns have full limbs, which means that this part would not be here. The limb would come all the way up to the cloth body. But 3/4 means that the little shoulder area and the little thigh area is still cloth, and then the limbs are going to go down here. So 3/4 of the limb is vinyl is what that actually means. So the first thing that we do, every artist is a little different in how they weigh their babies and what materials they use. I like to use these weighted poly pellets. These are very heavy little poly beads, and let's see if I could show. They are used for weighted blankets and those bean bags and, you know, those sorts of things. But some artists use glass beads. That's a little more common. I tend to get a better deal on getting these cost-wise, and I feel like they are just as good as the glass beads. So what I do is I take each limb and I fill it with these beads about, I try to go just above the joint usually, a little bit past the knee, and we shake it in there to get it all the way down to the foot. So I'll fill it until it is about, I don't know if I can't probably show you without spilling it all over, but it's just a little past the knee. And then what we do is take some polyfill stuffing and stuff the rest of it the rest of the way. And I try and shake it so that it all gets packed in there nicely. And then we stuff it the rest of the way with the polyfill stuffing. Now some babies I'll put rings around the legs so that the legs can move more freely, but this particular baby has no rings that go with it, so we aren't going to do that with this one. We always, unless there's a kit that does not have a head ring, we always use a head ring. There's a couple that don't have a ring that fits the head. So the first thing I'll do is do this with all of the limbs, and then I will come back and show you the next step. Okay, so the other thing that I forgot to show is once I get done with the polyfill stuffing on these limbs, what I do is I put a plug like this on the end to keep everything secure in there. So I usually put a little bit of polyfill stuffing inside the cap just to make sure that it's packed nicely. And then I put it over the end and push it. Sometimes they're real hard to get on. Sometimes they're a little bit loose. They all fit a little bit differently. So that's a completed limb with the weights in it. So the next thing we do is we take the body, and now we have to start attaching those limbs. And because this is a 3/4 body, 3/4 limb body, normally if it's a full limb baby and the limb goes up to here, we don't have to do this. But because there's this extra little pouch for the thighs and the shoulders, what we do is we put a little bit of polyfill stuffing in there. So we create a little bit of filling in this area before we attach the limbs. And when I was first starting reborning, I was taking apart a lot of babies because I kept forgetting to do that, and you can't not have the stuffing in there. So once you make a mistake with assembly, you kind of learn really quickly not to do that again, because it's very time consuming to undo the mistakes that you make with doing this. So I have to carefully make sure that this is aligned so that when I hold the body up, the limb is going to fall into place in a natural position. So I get it on there and then line it up where I need it to go. And there's a little groove here. This is where the zip tie is going to go, inside this little groove. And these would normally be a little tighter to start. But then we're going to zip these up, and I make them snug, but not all the way tight, because sometimes I need to adjust them or move them around. So until I'm done, I don't tighten this all the way, but I get it into position so that it holds nicely until I get it all completed and make sure that all of the limbs look right before I tighten up those zip ties and pull them off. So that's the next step. I'm going to go ahead and put these limbs on, and then we'll show you what's next. Okay, so here we are with the body with all of the limbs attached. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stuff the center of the body. So what I do is I take a little bit of polyfill stuffing first and get it at the bottom to kind of go in between the joints a little bit. And then we take a nylon stocking like this, and we're going to fill this pretty well with our weighted pellets. This is going to make the bulk of the weight in the body portion. And it can't be too much, it can't be too little. It's got to kind of fill the butt area and a little bit more usually. So that might be a little too much actually. Let me try and pour some of that out. Okay, so this looks about right to me. So let me just tie this off. And I have OCD, so I double knot and recheck everything because I'm paranoid about things coming apart. So I will double knot that. And then cut off the end. And then we have a little nylon sack of weighted beads like this. And then we're going to put this, that's the next thing that goes in the bottom here. This is, usually you want it to kind of pack the bottom and the butt area like this. And then the rest of the body is going to be filled with polyfill stuffing. And, whoops, I actually use quite a bit of this. Now sometimes with an older baby or a baby that's meant to be sitting up, what I'll do is I'll add another sack of those weights at the top here near the neck portion. But this baby I see as more of a newborn or a younger infant. So the weight that I want to add is going to actually be added in the back of the head instead of the top of the body. So it all just depends on the baby and the age of the baby as to where I feel the weight should go. And, you know, there's no real right or wrong. Every artist does their own thing differently, and you learn along the way to find your own style of, you know, painting as well as assembly and all of the processes you have to go through. You kind of just do what works for you. So this is a little bit of a chunky body, but I feel like it's pretty nicely weighted there and everything's falling into place good. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the head. And before I do anything, what I want to do is put this neck ring on the head, because I've found another mistake I used to make is to fill it, then try to put the neck ring on, which makes it very difficult to get the neck ring on. So first we put this neck ring on, and then we don't have to worry about everything falling out along the way. And it also makes the neck a lot more pliable and easier to work with when there's nothing stuffed inside the head. So I like to do that first. Okay, so this is the neck ring. And for this baby, what I'm going to do, because I want the weight in the back of the head, is I'm going to create another nylon weight stocking. So I'm going to take the rest of the one that I just used, because I try to not waste anything, and tie off that cut end, and then we're going to fill the rest of this stocking. Well, not the rest of it, it's quite large. Use a lot less for the head, and I'll show you how much I use to just give a little bit of weight to the back of the head. You don't want it too heavy. You just want it to feel like, you know, a newborn's head that will flop back when you hold it. So I make it about like here, a little ball, more than much smaller than the body. And this is about right. This might actually be a little bit big for this baby, but so this is going to go on the back of the head. And again, I cut off the end of that, so we just, yeah, I made this a little bit too big actually for this baby, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get in there, but that's okay. Just got to work it in till it gets in there. Keep shaking it down. Okay, so now the weight is at the back of the head, and then I just fill the rest with polyfill stuffing. It's always amazing to me because the heads and the polyfill stuffing, it reminds me of those clowns that keep coming out of the car. Like they just keep coming and coming and coming, and you have no idea how they fit in the car. And I can never figure out how I can get so much polyfill stuffing in these heads. It just seems like the head is so small, you shouldn't be able to do this much polyfill. So it's kind of funny to me. And actually I could keep going for all eternity with this, but you don't want it too heavy. So we're going to stop about here. And then there's the little cap that goes on the end of the head. So the other thing that we need to do is we need to add a scent wafer. These are little scented, baby powder scented wafers, and just open these up. And sometimes, I'll place them differently. Sometimes I'll put them in the body and put stuffing over, if it's a weighted body at the top, I usually will do it that way. But a lot of the times I'll usually put it in the head for like a regular newborn. So I just put it in here like this, so it's right in the neck area. And put a little bit of stuffing there, just a tiny bit, just to give it some packing. And then we put the rest of the polyfill into, whoops, too much, into the end of this plug. And we put the plug on here and seal the head, and now it has that nice baby fresh scent. So this is the completed head. And so now we just need to attach the head to the body. And we do this the same way that we did the limbs. It's a little trickier now because it's all together, but just goes here like this. I try to get the polyfill pushed down so it's not sticking out, of the top. It's a little tricky to do, especially with one hand. And then the zip tie goes around the little indentation in the neck ring here, and that makes it so the head can turn. So once you get that all together, now you have a head that turns. And the limbs do not have any rings because they are 3/4 limbs and they don't need to turn. The body is jointed, so it's going to, the limbs will move very freely anyways. So this is our completed little Kaya. And so now what I need to do is just pull these tight. All the zip ties, I get them as tight as I possibly can. I'm always worried about limbs falling off. It's never happened, but I'm paranoid. So what I do is I take pliers, and to help me get it as tight as I can get it, I don't want it to be able to move at all. And then I take wire cutters and cut it flush with the end and try and make sure there's no little sharp piece sticking out of that zip tie. And then we're going to do that with all the rest of the ties, and that will complete the process. So this is our little completed baby. Isn't he adorable? He or she. I think it's going to be a boy, but sometimes I dress them both ways and see what looks best. But that is how you assemble a reborn baby. And it is, of course, more time consuming than the video took, but that's because I didn't want to show doing each step for each limb individually and making it boring. So everything that you do is kind of time consuming, but this is actually really fun when he's done. And then once I get these all snipped off, all of the zip ties, the next thing that I would do is I will weigh him and measure him and, you know, mark all the statistics down so that when I sell him, I know exactly how big he is, and get a diaper on him and get him dressed, and then he'll be all ready to find a new mommy. So I hope you enjoyed this video showing the process of assembling a reborn doll.